So I'm looking at the introduction paragraph of one of your students' essays. We have it posted, and I'm just going to read the last two sentences of this paragraph. Because the literary pieces are told from different points of view, the reader's perception of Grendel in the two stories differs in that he is described as an antagonist in Beowulf, while he is regarded in a positive light in Grendel. Hearing events told from Grendel's point of view suggests that he wasn't as much of a monster as Beowulf thought. So I think that's a above average thesis statement. It probably could have a little more argument to it, but I think it's pretty well written. What type of instruction did you use to help students develop their thesis statements?
Well, as I mentioned, I introduced this prompt 3/4 of the way through reading the novel, and that's because I wanted students to see the prompt and immediately have a reaction, immediately have a point of view. So I actually gave students this handout, which is going to be posted in the Prezi, and you can download as well. But what this handout does is, after you look at the prompt, and in class we read the prompt, we broke it down, what are the different elements, what do you really need to be answering. But after students read the prompt, it says thesis statement.
Can I just stop you for a second?
Yes.
You took time to break down the prompt, to look at the different pieces of it. I think that's really important. A lot of our students on the writing test, they don't not pass because they can't write. They don't pass because they don't answer the question properly. So I think that's a really important skill, especially for your students who are about to write their college essays. Okay, go on.
So after we talked about the prompt, I have them write a rough draft thesis statement, and I give them like 5 to 7 minutes, and I say, okay, here's the prompt. Just write down what is your reaction, how would you answer this prompt in about 1 or 2 sentences. So they write down the thesis statement, and then I take the time to go around to each student and give them about a minute of time. I read their thesis statement, and I just quickly assess, okay, does that answer all the elements of the prompt? And then I ask them some questions like, could you use a better word here? Is there a literary term you could use here? I kind of help them really quickly edit
Word
it
choice.
and strengthen it quickly.
If I may ask, what are the other kids doing while you're peer conferencing?
Oh, well, that's what the bottom part of the worksheet is for. So while I'm walking around and checking on the thesis statements, other students are starting to pull evidence and pull their quotes. So hopefully, reading this prompt, they have the answer, and then they start thinking, oh, and when this happened, and when this happened, it relates to the prompt. So other students are going around and pulling out the quotes. Now, I don't just make them grab 10 quotes because it could take a student 10 minutes. Oh, I found my 10 quotes, the first 10 sentences I saw. So I also make them write the source, because they were comparing 2 texts, so it would be either from Beowulf or from Grendel, and the page number, so they could come back later and make their citations. And then I also have a column that asks them interpretation. How does this quote support your thesis? So I do that for a couple of reasons. One is, like I said, if I didn't, students could just have 10 quotes, and there they go, they're done. But also, if a student really sits there and thinks about the quotes, but then they take a couple of days or a week before they start writing, they could be looking at these quotes and realizing, I don't remember why I chose this.
And they're also going to be finding more quotes as they go.
Yes. Yeah. So I have this interpretation piece there to help them as they write. This is really a pre-writing strategy so that they have their evidence and then they know why they chose it. And this all relates to the strategy I teach for integrating quotes once they begin writing.
Right, which we'll talk about in a second. And what's really cool is that they can hold their thinking so they remember why they chose it. And what I also really like about it is it's right underneath the thesis statement. And it's so important that any piece of textual evidence that you choose relates to your claim. And by having it all on one paper like that, it's sort of a visual that every quote I choose has to relate to that thesis statement. And sometimes they choose quotes that they like, but they may not relate to their argument, or it may not be relevant. So it does that. And also you're giving them a skill that they can transfer onto other classes, like their social studies class, where they have to do primary source interpretations. And it's the same skill. When they take AP classes and they aren't have to search back all the quotes they want to use, they can take notes as they read. So you're really giving them a skill that they can use throughout their studies.
Yeah, and I agree. And just like this can transfer across the disciplines, it also can transfer across the grade levels. Even though this is for a 12th grade class, this same strategy I've used when I taught freshmen and when I taught sophomores. So this strategy can be used in a bunch of different courses.
And indeed, these standards are part of 9th and 10th grade. In our next segment, we'll talk about how they've collected these quotes, but now how are they going to integrate those quotes into the paragraph?